Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you one of the saddest detachments to come out of any of the codexes that have been released so far, in my humble opinion. And I guess I only care about my opinion. I'm joking, I'm joking. I care about anybody else's too. Eh, most people's. Eh, some people's? Anywho, we have the Annihilation Legion today, and this is a detachment that seemed unsavable until I really got down to the nitty gritty and thought about what's actually wrong with it. First off, I want to say that I think there's hope for this getting touched up because Crusher Stampede got touched up, and that was from one of the earlier codexes with Codex Tyrannid releasing at the start of Leviathan. And then, slowly we got down to AdMech and Necrons being released. I should also highlight that apparently I don't know why I've been just kind of lying in some of these videos that orcs are the army that I know the second best after Tyranids. It's definitely Necrons. I don't know why my brain just completely forgot like I got the Necron Codex and like went on a complete deep dive for most of these things. But anywho, um, the Necron Codex is a little bit of a worrisome one because the internal balance is horrid. That's a term that a lot of people will throw around, internal balance, when it comes to these codexes because you see, we do have a competitive detachment or two when it comes to Codex Necrons. We have not only Hypercrypt Legion, which is, of course, the one that you will see people actually winning things. The one that I always knew was going to be the best one before we had a deep striking monolith at LVO. Don't know. I still don't know why everybody acted like moving your Necrons that are kind of tanky, up and downy, was not going to be the best one. But I have had people kind of open my eyes as to why Canoptic Court was touted as highly as it was for so long. And even recently, we've been seeing people dive into Awakened Dynasty. But the ones that we haven't seen people tap into too much is Obeisance, Phalanx, and Annihilation Legion. Now, Obeisance Phalanx is a whole nother can of worms we're not talking about, but Annihilation Legion seems to be beyond repair for most people's eyes. And I'm not going to say that there is something here that's currently playable, but going through everything, I have ideas on what could make it playable. But first, let's talk about the struggles with it. First off, Annihilation Legion only applies to Destroyer Cult or Flayed ones. And the detachment rule is to reroll the charge roll for those units. And if the target of the charge is below half strength, not and that's again below, so not even meeting, add one to the charge roll as well. So problem number one is half a destroyer cult doesn't necessarily want to charge. The Hexmark Destroyer, even though it has pistols, doesn't mean that it necessarily wants to be in combat, especially because it's an Overwatch kind of thing. Then you have the Locust Lord, which honestly, sure, I'll yield. It kinda is better in melee than it is in shooting, even though the things that it leads, the Locust Destroyers and Locust Heavy Destroyers, are pretty much just for shooting. So, you see that list, why do I want anything to do with charging for them? The Ophidian Destroyers, Scorpec Destroyers, with, of course, the Scorpec Lord, and the Flay ones, yeah, they'll benefit from the charge roll, but only re-rolling the charge roll and a +1 to the charge roll if they're below half strength doesn't really make me want to take them outside of things like Awakened Dynasty, in which they could get +1 to hit because they have their character attached to the unit, and all sorts of shenanigans that are just better for them there. And even if you go to Hypercrypt Legion, where you can then move these units around, deep strike them, and then with the help of a stratagem and some other shenanigans, get them to charge after deep striking, they're better there as well. It's kind of hard to justify taking the best unit out of this list. Second best? Because you could argue the Locust Heavy Destroyers are better. But the Scorpic Destroyers, you have these, and they are pretty much the best thing out of what this detachment can make use of. And the best thing I can do for them here is charging to get them there. And then +1 to hit, possibly +1 to wound because of a CP instead of just having that as a detachment rule. It's not great. And then you look at the enhancements, and they seem so out of whack for what Necrons want to do as well. You have the only good one out of these enhancements being Internal Madness, in my opinion, in which 4 up, fight on death. Cool. Ingrained Superiority, thankfully, I just recorded a Unending Swarm Tyrannid detachment kind of breakdown. So it was weird that I was like, man, how did I never see this when those were the first two codexes I bought? That this is just Piercing Talons. Each time a model in the bear's unit makes an attack on a critical wound, improve the AP characteristic of that attack by 1. This also is an issue because the Locust Destroyers and the Scorpic Destroyers have access to lethal hits. So, what are you using this on? Because you can't attack. You can't. This is an enhancement, so it can't go on the flayed ones anyway. Somehow, sure, you can put it on the other gun for the destroyers, but this doesn't really help anything. I guess you could put it on the hex mark if you really want. You have 10 points lying around, but this ain't it, Chief. Then we go to Soulless Reaper, in which an enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer's unit is selected to fall back on a 3-up. They have to stay there. So you have that whole little World Eater shenanigan thing. But if I take this for 20 points, I'm going to be refusing myself the ability, if it goes off, to use Blood Fueled Cruelty for 1 CP, which would allow me to do mortal wounds on a 2 through 5 or a 6 being 3 mortal wounds, which is, I don't know if you know this, but that's better than a 3. And then making a normal move as close as possible. So, do I want them to stay in engagement range with me? And mind you, none of the units, as far as I can see, unless I'm really forgetting something, but none of the units that can benefit from these things have fights first. So, making them stay in combat with me doesn't necessarily give me an immediate advantage. So, Soulless Reaper is kind of stupid. And then we have Eldris Nightmare, which is also stupid. At the start of the fight phase, each enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer must take a battle shock test. This isn't Tyranids, Chaos Demons, Chaos Knights. The Night Lords, or excuse me, Dread Talons. Why am I battle shock testing? This is almost as bad as the Psychomancer. Like, why am I battle shock testing? Now I get that this could give me the possibility of turning off stratagems on the enemy in the fight phase against me, but I would rather just do that kind of like a tank shock Moloch kind of thing, where something like putting that on blood fueled cruelty, or maybe even, well, if you put it on Mask of Death, you have Masks of Death, you have Savage Roar from Crusher Stampede all over again, so maybe not, but you know, it's a very odd one that all of a sudden we want the chance to turn off stratagems. Instead of making this something like fights first, fight on. Okay, we already did fight on death up there, but like, I don't know, Lance something. But then there's also another reason why I realized that you can't give Lance. So I was looking at this, like, how do you even fix this? And one of the first things I was like, well, how come the Drukhari have a way to get Lance, but not a detachment that wants to be in melee? And then that's because if you give Lance, you kind of screw up the Spore of Frailty, in which if you are targeting a unit below half strength, add one to the wound roll. So you can't give Lance on that one. And then I was like, well, every other army has like advance and charge. Shouldn't there be an advance and charge somewhere in here? And that's what I think should happen if they are below half strength. I feel like if you have, especially going to the flavor of this army, or this detachment, I should say, in which the Annihilation Legion is like just crazy, send it, kill them. I think that below half strength, you should be able to charge on a target. And you might wonder, why not just straight up advance and charge? Because I think that you should get +1 melee strength versus below starting units. This also talks to why two things about Crusher and Hollowed Martyrs, and about kind of the way they got fixes and kind of the way they play. The biggest criticism with some of those is that you have to wait until something gets damaged. Now, that being yours versus it being theirs, or I guess it being theirs versus it being yours as the other ones. And I believe, I haven't really looked at the Blood Angels Codex one, but I believe they have a similar thing where it's just like, why do you want to hit something that is already bleeding? What is your incentive there? So rules that ask something to be damaged need to be a little bit better, which is why I feel like you need to get the +1 strength first, because you don't. If you put +1 strength, melee strength, and I know this is probably me talking about synapse bust, like subconsciously in my head when I came to these realizations, but you'll see I went through a lot of things and why a lot of things don't work, and I'll talk about those too. But if I were to fix Annihilation Legion, you have to give +1 strength below starting for two reasons. The thing that was a problem in Crusher, and, well, is kind of a problem in Hollowed Martyrs, but as we see, Sisters are perfectly fine right now because they still have this kooky little mechanic that lets them do whatever they want to do. The problem with those is that previously with Crusher, and the way they fixed it, is that you didn't get anything for being at starting strength. So you have pretty much 3 tiers of strength level. At starting strength, below half strength. You need to have a benefit for each point of those for the detachment to be worth it. As we've seen with Crusher Stampede. Crusher Stampede at starting strength, +2 OC to your monsters. Below starting strength, +1 to hit. Below half strength, +1 to wound. So you need to give this detachment something that not only is going to help the things that don't want to be in melee. Let's start there. But for the different phases, it shouldn't go from, okay, everybody can re-roll their charges, to, and if the target is below half strength, add 1 to the charge roll. Like, that's a gap. So to close that little step, to make sure that there's a reason to play it over playing Awakened Dynasty or Hypercrypt Legion, or pretty much anything at this point. +1 to melee strength versus below starting strength units is where I think that just makes more sense. That way, your things that pretty much don't want to be in combat, like, there's no AP on the Hexmark Destroyer's attacks, even though it has pistols that ignore cover. That's fine and dandy. But let's at least make it strength 6, so that, Bloodlust. Let's make it let's flavor it up. The Locust Lord, Sure, if you take the Lord's Blade, you sacrifice your shooting, but let's make it strength 9, technically. You'll get some better wounds, things like that. Or strength 6 if you have your Staff of Light, because strength 5, 2, 1 isn't really doing much. Locust Destroyers, again, they have lethals, and outside of that, you're hitting for 2 times strength 4. Even with the heavy, 2 times strength 4. So I think that's my first idea of how that can be fixed. The next thing is this garbage about add 1 to the charge roll for below half strength. I get it out of here. I think advance and charge would be better and a little bit more fair. Because we've seen other detachments have access to advance and charge, such as Vanguard Invader Tyranids and a few others, or we've also just seen that speed is the thing that people are just getting. With Renegade Raiders and Bringers of Flame, people just get to advance and shoot, which is the thing that they're best at in those armies at the moment. And then with Renegade Raiders, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's a stratagem in it that lets you charge as well after you have advanced, or maybe it's just fallback. But pretty sure I haven't looked at that one too tough. I probably should look at that right now. Yeah, sure. Let's do it live. Let's do it live, just to make sure I'm not talking complete crapperoni. But or let's see if brute biosynctic brood surge does it too. Because if it's not like advance and charge is the hardest thing to do. All right, yeah, get assault, auto advance, precision. Is this charge? Yes. Okay. Until your unit is eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which it advanced. So yeah, like if Renegade Raiders can get that and they already have access to something, biosync the brood surge. What do you do again? Add 1 charge rolls. If it made a charge roll, add 1 to attacks. That's even better. Well, not better than advance and charge. Yeah, maybe, could be, but it's still better than what is given there. Do you all have access to advance and charge? A leadership test, wound roll, ambush marker, consolidate pilot, and shenanigan. All right, so it doesn't look like there's advance and charge there. But you do have heroic intervention for 0. Do pure strain gene stealers. What's their rule? Just real quick. That's why. That I'm like, no, there's something in here. Um, declare a charge and a turn in which they're advanced. So there's access to advance and charge for other melee focused detachments, and we just don't have that in Annihilation Legion. So if you can just make it so, like, all right, thematically, the enemy's bleeding. Now, if you are targeting them, or any Necron unit that is targeting an enemy's unit that is below half strength, can charge in a turn in which it advanced. Boom, bam, bop. Got that. Then going over to what these things can do. Eldris Nightmare, I'm thinking that instead of this battle shock test, have the enemy OC and engagement range. I will say, still probably a little bit more Tyranid peeled, where I was thinking about Ominous Presence and Crusher Stampede, probably in the back of my head for 15 points as well. But we see that objective control is still very important, and you're not. This one doesn't really have anything to help your battle line or help you get objective control throughout this detachment. So it'd be neat if one of your units can kind of just like Great Unclean one, or is it Rodigus, or is it both of them, or is it just Death Guard too? Death Guard can -1 OC, right? For their containment range. Not looking up that one too, but the point is, Eldritch Nightmare. I think instead of this whole battle shock flavor, because battle shock doesn't really help in Necrons, you have nothing to alter leadership and things like that. Make it so that they're too scared to hold control or something like that. Um, will say I also got thinking about Annihilation Legion because GW's marketing somehow it is good sometimes. That little vignette that they recently released with Death Watch versus Scorpec Lord. Yeah. Well, I think there's a Flay one in there too. But yeah, like, I was just like, man, I do like Scorpec Lords now that you mention it. So, something like that. Make it hey, there was a I don't know if this is a spoiler or if people care about spoilers of this, but there's a 2v1, right? So like make it so that there's a reason for it to be a 2v1. Like for every Scorpec Lord or Destroyer that has 2 OC, 2 OC. Let's make it so that something else has 1, let's even that playing field for that one. And then Soulless Reaper, I think that you take the same route of some other detachments, especially like Stalker and Vanguard Onslaught for Tyranids, where one of your enhancements is just one of your stratagems for free in a vacuum. Because Soulless Reaper, like I said, I don't want something to counteract my stratagems. Instead, how about this be just a way of maybe fights first. I was also thinking sustained hits. Mm, yeah, something like that. I think I think fights first is my favorite one. Or maybe even heroic intervention for free, like we see in. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep referencing Tyranids, but like we see in Assimilation Swarm, where uh uh is it parasitic biomorphology? No, it is instinctive defense that gives heroic intervention within range. But it's kind of weird that there's no straight up fights first in the fighting detachment. So Soulless Reaper, get on that. As for the stratagems, the only one that I think I had the biggest beef with is like Pitiless Hunters because I've seen it used in like tournaments, watching from War Games Live. Basically, that sometimes an additional 3 inches to the pile in a consolidate can be handy, but I think that should be your advance in charge one. Like I feel like that should be your this unit can advance in charge if you don't make it a detachment rule. We also don't have access to precision, which now you can argue they shouldn't get precision because the whole thing is just like tearing everything apart. So there's no real logic. They're based on going into madness. So cool. But then if that's the case, why not sustained? Like, why is there no sustained here? I understand that the flayed ones have sustained, but pretty much everything else has lethal hits. So I think sustained, especially on the destroyer cult units, whether that be also shooting or fight phase, let's start there too. Um, Giving sustained on the Locust destroyers, especially the heavy destroyers that have rapid fire, that would give me a reason to use these in their detachment over the other ones, where it's just +1 to hit and some rerolls. Sustained and that just hail of fire would be great, especially with sustained and lethals during the fight phase for the Scorpex. Perfect. So Pitiless Hunters, I would like to see it become sustained. That's that's on me. And now I kind of want to talk about the things that I thought about that don't really work as the detachment rule and why, just in case GW was on the same track of thinking with me. Fights first. I was like, man, have we had a detachment that's just gives the things fights first? That would mean that at least my Hexmark Destroyer and Locust heavy destroyers and locust destroyers that didn't want to be in combat at least have a way to get their lick in before they go down. But that might be too powerful for an army wide rule because, like, you would just win versus everything, I think. Like, I don't think Necrons. Now, I will say, we've seen Imhotep kind of sauce up Calgar, if I remember correctly. Um, so, maybe they are the superior ones, but, like, I think fight first might be too strong for an army wide rule. However, if you disagree and think that I'm not too far off the rocker, let me know. Talked about sustained hits. The reason sustained hits probably can't be a detachment rule is because, again, flayed ones have it on their weapon, so you would already be shooting yourself in the foot for one of your key units. Precision talked about that one. Fight on death for. I thought fight on death might be better, but again, like fights first. If you give your entire army fight on death 4 up, that sounds busted, but then you have like demons and GSC, where rolling 4 ups is kind of hard, but making it every model in your unit, or sorry, every model in your army basically, that's kind of tough. And you're probably looking at the title and wondering why I titled it this long. This is one of the detachments that you can't just throw in a Catan and call it a day to help you out because there's nothing in this one that the most powerful units in the Codex can utilize. Catan can't use any stratagems. Can't. Well, they can't take enhancements anyway. Um, but yeah, there's nothing here. Unfortunately, they can't even. It's not even like I'm going to reference another army again, or my turn again. Sorry, but it's not like in Vanguard or Vader where at least everything gets like fall back in charge. Like no, there's nothing here. So you have the weakest detachment that can't even supplement itself by giving a benefit to the strongest units in the Codex. That makes it kind of bad. Not kind of bad. It makes it kind of awful. Because at least things with like obeisance phalanx, you can. Here we go. I know how to work this. We got this. Crits on fives, because excluding Titanic. Um, Canoptic Court. What's the one that you can use in Canoptic Court? None of that. But Canoptic Court's good, so I'll eat that one. But yeah, you can't supplement yourself, which is kind of annoying. And then if you do, like, take them in here, they're still, what is it, 6 inch move, right? Let's go to the final one, because yeah, there's still 6 inches of movement. So it's kind of tough to justify bringing a Catan in here. And that's not to say that you need to bring Catan in every Necron list. In fact, I think more people would be happy if you didn't. But even something like a Tesseract Vault, what are we doing? Triarch Stalker just to remove cover, but it's just like your melee. Why do you care? But they do have scouts, so like Tombblade scouts and something like that. You can put forward pressure in it, but there's not too many fun things you can do. Um, I was looking for Trajan to see if he fights first, or is it, or can he get Super Saiyan mode 1 turn? Yeah, just triples. It doesn't even get fights first there. So it's like there's no fights first throughout the entire codex unless I'm truly missing something. You don't do any battle shock shenanigans except for the Psychomancer, so that's kind of weird that they threw that in there. And even then, the Psychomancer is -1 to the test. So, like, can we at least make it -1 to the test for boom 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 Eldris Nightmare? Like, at least give a fighting chance. But the problem with all of this is that Necrons are still arguably good with Hypercrypt Legion. So how do you buff anything justifiably. Like, why would you say, well, we should touch on the Necrons when they have something that works besides just making it better for the players? And even then, hopefully, they do that. That way, you get more varied list instead of just Annihilation. I'm sorry, just Hypercrypt Legion. Um, now that they killed Canoptic Court, because that's the other thing that is my biggest grievance with how the Necrons Codex has been handled the entire edition, is that it was just shooting whatever was getting too popular and putting that down instead of justifying it in another place. Like, don't get me wrong, Wraiths are still good, Catan are still pretty damn good. They don't always, both of those units don't always need to be better, but you killed Lichguard. Pretty much killed Lichguard. Killed Canoptic Court. Been working on making Hypercrypt Legion worse because now you can't Cosmic Precision the Catan because they have monsters. It's just like, so where does the offset come in? Right? Like, I know we dropped the price of Scorpec Lords, but I'd argue they're still a little too expensive. So there's that. But going through the units of why some of the issues were. The Scorpic Lord, I feel like this would be a great another reason to put sustained hit somewhere into the detachment because rapid fire sustained there or just lethal hits sustained on top of that. Um, Now, Scorpic Lord does have pseudo tank shock, so that's cute, but hey, it's already an okay unit. Hey, I should, and then if we go with the other thing about why sustained versus lethal would be banger in this is because of the plasma sights. Sustained dev, yeah, I want that, please. And the reason that I didn't want to do anything with rerolls on top of that, that's what I forgot to mention earlier, is because the Scorpic Destroyers have reroll hits of 1. And if it's a charge roll, reroll the entire hit. I was also thinking about Twin Linked in that aspect, but where are we at? Twin Linked is already on Flayed Ones, so there's that too. Uh, there needs to be a reroll hits and wounds somewhere in this detachment too, but again, the best melee unit already has it. Flayed Ones caused a lot of issues because they have tools, but I was thinking about making a video about why we need to be bringing more Flayed Ones, and it was inspired by the Hernken Jaegers. 10 models infiltrating stealth 441. Better than Gargoyle Jill that kind of worked in the past. Yeah, I like Flayed Ones. And they can reanimate during my command phase. Yeah, I like Flayed Ones. And in Hypercrypt Legion, you can deep strike them, but that's neither here nor there. I say that to say, maybe bricks of Flayed Ones might be better. Like, I get that's 240 points for 10 models that you are using exclusively just to jam up the board. But that's a lot of board jamming that can happen with infiltrating stealth units that reanimate, that have sustained hit 1, twin length, strength 4, AP 1, D1. Like, you can actually get through Eldar pretty handedly. And yeah, and show them who's boss, just like it went down in history. They're still scared. Hexmark destroyers, I kind of highlighted this earlier, but they're here for fire overwatch. They have deep strike and lone up. Surprisingly, they don't have stealth. So like maybe if they got stealth slapped on somehow, but again, they're already good in Hypercrypt Legion, so you probably won't see that ever happening. Um, and they can shoot during opponent shooting phase. I like Hexmark Destroyers. They're a good unit. They're characters, so they can take some of these things. And that's the other thing about why I want to change some of those enhancements is that I want to put them onto my Hexmark Destroyer and not feel bad about it, because why would I do either of these? You can argue this, but can you? And I'm not putting 25 points just to one time. Hopefully, hope I can roll a 4 up on my Hexmark Destroyer. So it's kind of a waste that one of your 3 characters isn't taking isn't realistically taking any of these enhancements. Like, yeah. Go on to the Locust Lord. I have my problems with the Locust Lord, but you can possibly give a 5 up Feel No Pain if that's the route you want to take. Because Resor, I don't know if you need it that much with this detachment. Like, you're not throwing them in there, even though that's what the detachment wants you to do by giving it charge bonuses, or charge effects, I should say. Not even really a bonus, but at current, you're probably better off taking the 5 Feel No Pain for these damn things. But, again, with my suggestions, they could be better. Same with the destroyers. They already have lethal hits. But imagine just Locust Heavy Destroyer with heavy lethal hits sustained. They already have sustained on the Rapid Fire Heavy 6. I got that. And reroll wounds. Cool. But heavy lethal, that makes them dangerous. Makes them pretty dangerous and a reason to do it. Or maybe even if we take this into a dread mob situation where you can choose between, or I guess invasion fleet too. Um, Choose between lethals or sustain for what you want to do with some of these stratagems, like or orcs in general, because they are. Well, I shouldn't say in general. They have it on Cult of Speed as well. But yeah, there needs to be a trade off for the damage output for me to put them in here handedly. And Psycho Manticore is just because that's the only other thing that really has a battle shock shenanigan in this army. Unless I'm forgetting something else. Oh, Ophidian Destroyers. Let's talk about those too. These are the Raveners of the Necrons. That if you gave additional strength, they don't have sustain, they don't have twin linked. So they are pretty much worse flayed ones. They have deep strike, but you can pull them on and off the board to do actions. But they also get a plasma sight for dev wounds. So that's cool. And again, sustained dev wounds, sustained lethals would make this army or this detachment so much better. So that's kind of my spiel on how to fix Annihilation Legion and the issues with it. So hopefully I can get this out on time for GW to consider it before this next balanced data slate that they confirmed. It's going to be a balanced data slate. Or at least I saw that somebody said that they saw that they was going to be confirmed. So yeah, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.